Hello everyone. In our previous sessions, we have already studied variables in Python and variable naming rules. Today we are going to extend our understanding and learn an important new concept called as identifiers in Python. Before learning identifiers, let us first recall the concept of variables using a civil engineering laboratory example. Look at the slide carefully. In a civil engineering material laboratory, cement is stored in one container, sand is stored in another container, clay is stored separately. Each material is isolated and organized properly. Why? Because engineers must clearly know what material is stored, where it is stored, and how to use it during experiments. In the same way, Python also needs a proper system for storing data. This is where variables come into the picture. Previously, we studied that Python variables work like digital containers. Instead of storing physical materials like cement or sand, these digital containers store data. In this slide, the value 12 is stored inside a digital variable. For example, beam underscore length equal to 12. Here, the value 12 is the data, and Python stores this data safely inside a variable. So we can say variables are digital storage containers for data. Now let us think carefully. If many variables exist inside a program, how do we identify each storage containers? How do we know which variable stores beam length, which variable store traffic volume, and which variable stores cement ratio? For that, Python uses names. Look at this statement carefully. Beam underscore length equal to 12. We already know variables store data, and variable names should be meaningful and readable. But now an important question arises. What exactly is the technical name for the text beam underscore length in Python? This name is technically called as identifier. So today we will learning about these identifiers in detail. The word identifier may sound technical, but the meaning is actually very simple. Identifier is nothing but your name. An identifier is simply the name used to identify something in Python. At beginner level, the identifiers we mainly use are variable names. So names like beam underscore length, cement underscore ratio, traffic underscore volume, all are identifiers. Now let us connect the real world laboratory system with Python programming. Suppose in a laboratory we have a container that is meant to store some material, but currently it is empty. Now when we store a material inside it, suppose cement, we usually identify that container by the name of the material. For example, we may call it the cement container. Here the name cement acts like a label or tag used to identify that container. In Python, this label or tag is called an identifier. Now suppose the container stores 5 kg of cement. This 5 kg is the actual content stored inside that container. Here this 5 kg content in Python, it is called as data. So in this analogy, we understood that the container represents the variable, the label or tag on the container represents the identifier, the material quantity stored inside the container represents the data. So finally, we got to know that the variable stores the data and the identifier gives a name to that variable. Imagine a large civil engineering laboratory filled with containers. Suppose each container stores different materials. To identify the containers, every container requires a label. For example, cement underscore sample, sand underscore sample, CA underscore sample. Without labels, engineers would become confused. Similarly, in Python, variables store the data and identifiers are the labels used to identify those variables. So you can remember, variable store the data and identifier gives the variable its name. Now let us clear one beginner level confusion. Many students think a variable and a identifier are exactly the same thing. Actually, they are closely related but technically different. Now look at this variable section. A variable stores data, acts like a container and holds the value. Now look at this identifier section. An identifier gives a name, acts like a label and identifies the storage. So the correct understanding is variable represents storage, identifiers is the name used for that storage. Now let us break down the Python statement or the Python code water underscore cement underscore ratio equal to 0.45 into various components. Suppose the computer first creates a storage space to hold a value. To identify that storage space, a label or name is assigned to it. Here the label is water underscore cement underscore ratio. This label is called an identifier in Python because it helps us to identify the variable storage location. Now when we write equal to 0.45, the value 0.45 is stored inside that variable space. So in simple words, water underscore cement underscore ratio is the variable identified by the identifier. Equal sign is your assignment operator and 0.45 is the value stored in that variable. This means variable named water underscore cement underscore ratio is storing the value of 0.45. Earlier in our previous studies, we have discussed about variable naming rules, but technically those rules are actually the rules for identifiers because the variable names itself is an identifier. Now let us quickly revise correct and incorrect identifiers. Here beam underscore length, traffic underscore volume, cement underscore ratio, these are correct because they are meaningful, they are readable and follows Python naming rules. Now see beam length, numerical 1 st underscore beam hyphen length @ these are incorrect because spaces are not allowed, identifiers cannot start with numbers and special symbols are not permitted. So you can say, just like engineering drawings, we have to follow some standards. In Python also, Python identifiers also follow naming standards. So finally we have understood that in Python, the variable represents the storage location used to store data, and the identifier is the name used to identify that storage. Just like a laboratory container stores material and the label identifies the container. So in today's session, we have studied variables are meant for storing data, identifiers give names to those variables, and variable naming rules are actually identifier naming rules. So in the next session, we will continue our learning journey by exploring another important concept in Python programming, that is Python operators and expressions. So see you in the next session.